Hello everyone and welcome to this UCEN Manchester session on planning your study time and prioritising tasks. What will be covered in this session? So we're going to go through managing your workload. Obviously while you are in higher education you will have quite a heavy workload at times, and it is important that you do know how to manage that workload. And not to worry if you are stressing about this is something that you're struggling with. There are lots of ways that you can effectively manage your workload while you are in higher education. So we're going to go through that with you. I'm going to go through with you planning your time for your assessments and your classwork, because obviously when you are in higher education you have to plan a lot for all this work that you've got to do. And if you are struggling with planning at the minute and you're not really sure how to do it effectively, hopefully the tips and tricks I give you there will help with that. Once we kind of got the planning ideas in your head and we kind of thought about that a little bit, and I'm going to talk you through how to stick to these plans that you've created, because obviously it's one thing to plan, but you then also need to stick to those plans. We're going to go through prioritisation, because when you are in higher education you'll have lots of different tasks that you need to deal with all at once. So we're going to go through how you can prioritise different tasks while you are in higher education. And we're going to talk about the elephant in the room as well a little bit in this session. I'm going to talk to you about COVID-19 and how you can stay organised during COVID-19 when you are studying at the moment. Just going to talk you through managing your workload. So when you are trying to manage your workload, it's really important that you be realistic. And what I mean by that is when you've got lots of assessments, lots of reading to do for university, and we've all got other things that go on in our lives simultaneously while we're at university. Be realistic about how much time it's going to take you to do this work, so you can ensure that you give yourself enough time to do it. Don't procrastinate. So if you know you have an assessment due in 3 weeks, don't leave it till the night before, because that's not going to help you effectively manage your workload. That's just going to ensure that your workload just piles on top of each other, and your workload is just going to get bigger and bigger the more you procrastinate. Create a timetable. So if you know, for example, you work really well in the evenings and you have time free in the evenings, create a timetable when you're going to do your work in the evenings, and make sure when you do create this timetable that you add in any part-time work or anything like that you currently do, or any other commitments that you've got currently, so you can see exactly when you actually have free to do your work. Set your own deadlines. So this is something that I always did when I was at university. If you know you have a essay due in a month, maybe say to yourself, I'm going to have it finished in 3 weeks, so I have a week to proofread it and check my references, and that way you give yourself plenty of time before your actual deadline to complete your work. Make sure as well, if you've listened to or are going to listen to the stress management slides, I talk about the importance of taking time for yourself, but make sure that you do take time for yourself, as it can be really effective when you are trying to manage a workload, to take time for yourself, have a little break and come back to it later. So I'm just going to talk you through planning time for your assessments and your classwork. If this is something that you're worrying about, hopefully these tips and tricks that I'm going to talk you through now will help you. So the first thing I would say when you are thinking about planning time for your assessments and classwork is, I mentioned before about creating timetables. If you're sat in front of your timetable and you're trying to jot ideas down about when you are going to do your work and when you've got time to do your assessments and your classwork, give yourself more time than you actually need. So for example, if you have 4 weeks to do an assignment or an essay or something like that, and you think you can get it done in 3 weeks, give yourself 3.5 weeks maybe, just in case something comes up that you need to deal with. You can then take the time to deal with that thing, because life gets in the way sometimes and it can't be helped. So when you have to go and deal with that thing, you're not going to be worried about getting your assessment done on time, because you've given yourself more time than you actually need. So planning for things, planning that extra time in case something happens is a really good way of ensuring that you get your work done on time. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. I know definitely when I was at university, I put so much pressure on myself. When I was sat there, I was looking in front of my calendar, trying to plan time for my assessments and classwork. I felt so overwhelmed looking at my plan, trying to think of when I was going to do everything I needed to do. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, because the more pressure you put on yourself, the harder things will get for you in terms of getting things done, and that pressure will build and build and build. And then the more pressure there is on you, or the more pressure you put on yourself, the harder you're going to find it to do your work and plan for your assessments and your classwork. So it is easier said than done, but try not to put too much pressure on yourself because you're doing a fantastic job, I'm sure. I would say as well, plan ASAP. So in the next day or two, if you've got an assessment due in a month's time, plan when you are going to do everything you need to do for this assessment. So you could do, for example, if you're going to start on Monday the 2nd of November, for example, you could, the first thing you could do for a couple of hours in the morning, if you work best in the mornings, is create a plan for essay. And that's what you could do in the morning of the 2nd of November. And the 3rd of November, you could then be, you could write in your planner, start paragraph 1. And if you plan things like that meticulously and you tick things off as you go along, it's going to be a lot easier for you to stick to your deadlines and things like that. I also would say don't neglect one for the other. So if you are planning time for your assessments and your classwork, you're more than likely going to prioritise your assessments, which is fine, but give yourself time to do your classwork as well, because the classwork that you're doing now, the better you do it, the easier you will and the more prepared you will feel to do assessments later on in the year as well. Now that I've talked you through planning time for your assessments and your classwork, I'm going to move on to how to stick to those plans, because obviously it's a really good thing that you have created these plans. You then need to stick to them, otherwise what's the point of you making the plans? So once you've created plans, you do really need to stick to them, especially in higher education. So in order to stick to the plans that you created for your studies, the first thing I would say is have the correct mindset. So when you are approaching your plans and you want to stick to those plans, you need to do so with the correct mindset. So don't approach it in a negative way. Don't say to yourself things like, oh, I haven't got the energy to do this, I don't really want to do this, I want to do something instead. Thinking in a negative way like that, if you think like that, chances are you will not stick to the plans that you've created. You need to think in a positive way. So try saying to yourself things like, I'm really motivated to do this, I really want to stick to these plans, I'm going to stick to these plans. Saying positive things like that to yourself can ensure that you stick to the plans that you have created. The next thing is to hold yourself accountable. So if you say to yourself, I'm going to have an essay plan done by the end of next week, there is nothing holding you accountable to that plan. So it's really easy for you to break that plan and change it and push it back, or, not do it at all. If you hold yourself accountable, and all I mean by this is, if you say to a family member or a friend, preferably somebody on your course, that you want to send them that plan by the end of next week, and to get them to message you and to check with you that you have done it, that person is then relying on you and waiting on you to send them your plan for your essay. So that holds you accountable to it, and because somebody is relying on you and waiting on you to do something, you're more likely to stick to those plans. The next thing is make it as thoughtless as possible. And when I say thoughtless, I don't mean that you don't put any thought into it. All I mean is if you get into the habit of doing things that you plan to do, you start ticking things off in your diary, you start to do things like that. The smaller things that you have to do, the small things you plan to do throughout higher education become thoughtless, and it becomes a habit, so you just do it without even thinking. So it's not even that thing of, oh, I've got to do this and it's annoying to you. You just do it automatically because it's a habit. So try and create those habits wherever possible. As well, the last thing I would say is it's really important to surround yourself with the correct people. So you don't want to be hanging around with people or communicating with people whilst you are trying to work who are negative. They encourage you not to do your work. They go, oh, come on, let's not do this, let's chat and video chat instead, let's do something else other than you working. You do not want to surround yourself with those kinds of people, because it makes it a lot harder for you to stick to your plans. If you surround yourself with people who respect the fact that you've got to work a lot of the time while you're in higher education, they're supportive of you, chances are you're more than likely to stick to your plans. So I'm just going to talk you through prioritisation and how you can prioritise different parts of your work when you are studying at university. And what I would say is it can take a little bit of time to know how to do this, but hopefully these tips that I'll give you here can really help. So the first thing I would do is when you've got lots of assessments or classwork to do, separate the tasks you have to do in terms of which ones are urgent and which ones are important. Once you have then completed the urgent tasks, so make sure you get the urgent ones done first. So if you have a reading that's due in a couple of days' time, and that's quite urgent that you get that done, so spend the next couple of days reading that. And once you've done all that, tick off all the urgent ones, and that's something that you don't need to think about. You've done all them tasks, you can then move on to the important tasks. So once you've done that, you've done all the urgent ones and you've moved on to the important tasks. What I then would say is separate tasks according to which ones have most value. And all I mean by this is, in terms of the tasks that you've identified as important, which ones hold the most value, and which ones do you think out of the important tasks are maybe the most important ones, or if it's an assessment, for example, and you're trying to prioritise your assessments, and which ones to do first and things like that, and which ones to get cracking on. If you know one is going to be a little bit harder, maybe start on that so you can do the easier ones after. Or if you know one's worth 70% E grade and one's worth 25% E grade, that kind of gives you an idea of how much time you should spend on each. Obviously, as I said before, don't neglect either, but giving more value to one thing over the other. So the one that's worth 75% as opposed to one that's worth 25%, as long as you're not neglecting the 25% one. Maybe spend a little bit more time on getting the 75% essay done first, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my quick tips into prioritization. There are many different methods of prioritization, so if you are unsure of these ones or you try it and it doesn't work, you could maybe try something like the prioritization matrix, which if you look online or if you look at the handout, which I'll provide later on at the end of this session, if you look at that handout, they could really work for you as opposed to the ones on here. So if this doesn't work for you, don't worry, there's lots of different ways you can prioritise tasks. So it's just a matter of trying to find the one that works for you. I'm just going to talk you through staying organised during COVID-19, because obviously at the minute we're all struggling with the current circumstances, and it is really difficult and it presents a lot of challenges, including when you do need to do work and things like that. You've got assessments to do, reading to do. It is hard at times at the minute to stay organised, and that's completely fine. So hopefully these tips and tricks can help you with staying organised during COVID-19. So the first thing I would say is be kind to yourself. At the minute, everybody's struggling, everybody's in a similar position. You're not the only one struggling to stay organised during COVID-19. I definitely do at times. It can be very tricky, so the important thing is to be kind to yourself and know that you are doing a really good job. I would also say ask for extra support if you need it. This is something that I found really useful during COVID-19. When I've needed extra support and guidance, I've asked for it, and that's really helped me stay on track and stay organised. So if you are struggling to stay organised, just mention it to your tutor and they can maybe meet with you to come up with some ideas on how you can stay organised, and they can help you with that a little bit. I would also say write lots of checklists. So this is something that I do weekly. I have a weekly diary and I write down a list of everything that I need to do on a daily basis, and I tick it off once I've done it and check it at the end of every day. If there's something that I have not managed to do, I'll then try and do it the next day and tick it off the next day once I've done it, and then at the end of the week I just review and make sure I've done everything that I needed to do. Writing checklists as well, it can be really helpful at the minute because there's a lot of stuff going on currently. We've all got heavy workloads, especially at the minute we're all at home, but we've still got the heavy workload that we had when we were in the office or on campus and things like that. So it can be really easy to forget things sometimes, so writing checklists can ensure that you don't forget things. I would also say to stay organised, still get up at a normal time. So for example, if you are struggling to get up at the minute and you're getting up at like 1-2 o'clock, that's eating a big chunk out of your day, and that will make it harder for you to stay organised as there's less time for you to do the things you need to do. So if you still get up at a normal time and do things throughout the day, it'll be a lot easier to stay organised. And I'll also say as well, try and have a designated workspace. It's really easy to sit in bed and do work that way and just have your laptop in front of you whilst you've sat in bed watching TV. It makes it a lot harder to stay organised doing things like that, as your mind's going to wander. You're going to get more sleepy because you sat in your bed. you're going to be watching the TV at the same time. Tasks that you got to do are just going to pile up and pile up and pile up because you're getting distracted easily. So having a designated workspace that is maybe separate to your bedroom can really be beneficial in the long run. Thank you for attending this UCEN Manchester session on planning your study time and prioritising tasks. I hope you found it useful, and I hope some of the advice that I gave you within this session is something that you can take forward to help when you're planning your study time and prioritising tasks in the future. Thank you.